Hello, everyone, and welcome to the U.S. Center. This event is Dear World Leaders, a message from youth. And now I'm super excited to welcome to the podium Brenda Mallory, Chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here and to see such a full house. Excited to have the opportunity to hear from some of our youth leaders as we move forward. I want to thank Emily for the introduction, and thank you to all the young people joining us whose work drives us on our climate and environmental justice goals in the United States and across the globe. We are all in a fight together. And though past generations have not fully had an eye toward the future the way we should have, we are committed to tackling this challenge head-on alongside all of you. Young people are acutely aware that the climate impacts of underserved and overburdened communities are disproportionate, and that addressing it will require bold action with an equity lens to ensure that no one is left behind. And I want to commend you all for that. I grew up in a working class family in Connecticut, and when I was younger, certainly at the age of many of the folks that we'll be hearing from today, not many of us were paying much attention to climate change. But as time has passed, we've all seen the incredible importance in our being able to address the issues that we are facing today. And not only focus on them and give them attention, but also they demand action. I'm proud to work for President Biden and in an administration overall that is integrating climate action and environmental justice into everything that we do. That's why today I'm proud to announce the first United States Ocean Justice Strategy. The Ocean Justice Strategy will help advance the Biden-Harris administration's ambitious environmental justice goals by working to improve the well-being of people in communities connected to and dependent on the ocean. The ocean and Great Lakes are a life source for all communities, and the threat of climate change impacts economic vitality, access to food, and the future viability of communities. Now, for the first time, the U.S. government is outlining how it will integrate principles of equity and environmental justice in our federal ocean activities. That includes conservation, management of marine resources, and infrastructure projects. The Ocean Justice Strategy was called for by the United States' Ocean Climate Action Plan, which the Biden-Harris administration released earlier this year, to accelerate our whole-of-government approach to ocean-based climate action. This plan is pointing the U.S. towards new climate solutions within the ocean depths, because we know there is no path to a healthy and livable climate without the ocean. President Biden believes that all people should have equitable access to the benefits that the ocean provides, like good-paying jobs, healthy and plentiful food, functioning coastal ecosystems that protect from extreme weather, clean energy like offshore wind, and access to recreation and transportation and trade. The Ocean Justice Strategy has three main goals. Number one, to advance ocean justice across the government by providing opportunities for meaningful community engagement and better incorporating equity into the funding processes and budgets. Number two, to develop a diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible federal ocean workforce. And number three, to enhance ocean justice through education, data, and knowledge by expanding and improving ocean education and workforce development. This is just the start. Over the last 3 years, the President has secured historic funding to fight the climate crisis, combat pollution, and create good-paying jobs. We are really starting to see the positive impacts from more resilient infrastructure and equitable economic opportunity. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to centering justice as we confront the climate crisis, and we will continue to do so as we invest historic funding from the Investing in America agenda directly into communities. Engaging with young people, like those here today, is an essential part of shaping future efforts when it comes to climate justice work. After all, it is our goal to ensure you all can take the baton and continue this race against climate change. We need your input, we need your feedback, we need your ideas, and we need them all now, because we recognize that the decisions that we are making will have implications for future generations. So I hope we continue this important conversation and continue to work together to secure a cleaner, healthier, and prosperous future for all communities. And I want to encourage you all to keep pressing the envelope. Your advocacy is a driving force on the climate, and we need your voices. With that, I would like to introduce the panelists who are here today. First, Haley Campbell, Co-Executive Director with CARE. Haley's got a fanfare. With CARE About Climate and organizer with the U.S. National Youth Conference on Climate. Next, Meraki Tamaret, a member of the Earth Eco Youth Leadership Council. Pooji Masareddy, a youth advisor board member with Action for Climate Emergency. Natasha Bhatia, high school senior at Hinsdale Central High School and the co-chair of Fridays for Future Chicago. And Raina Tinging Fong, the wildlife refuge specialist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Pacific Islands Refuge and Monuments Office. Phew. We are excited. We're excited to have you all here today, and thank you for this important conversation.
First of all, thank you so much for the warm welcome, Chair Mallory, and to the amazing turnout in this room. This is really an incredible audience, and that might be the loudest applause I've heard all week. So it really goes to show how important the youth voices and everyone on this panel are. And I'm really honored to be able to open up this session about how world leaders can listen more to young leaders, so we have 4 here on the stage today. And to the point of listening, what we really hope comes out of this conversation is more action on the asks of young people, more action on the opportunity to include young people in discussions, not just here at COP28, but also back at home where we're all advocating for change to act on the climate emergency. Yeah, thank you. One way that young leaders this year came together to act for the climate emergency was to develop a national youth climate statement. Over 150 young people from across the United States and virtually came together to create this document. I'll show it. This amazing document, this youth statement that young people in the United States are calling on our leaders at the national level and the international level to act on climate change. And I'll be honored to share this with our leaders later today as well. And what's really critical is that when we're here on this stage, we're not just representing our voices, representing the voices of other young people that have really shaped these outcomes, but also our perspectives and a lot of the work that we'll be talking about today. So we are excited to have you listening to us, and we can't wait to see how what we talk about today will turn into even more action. With that said, I'm going to invite our speakers to answer our first question here today. And as a quick note, you'll notice that most of us here on the stage are wearing some form of black today. And that's because today's action at COP is for people to wear the color black in support of calling for the equitable fossil fuel phase-out that we all need for a just and sustainable future. So a lot of you have joined us. Thank you for that, and we hope to see some action on this at COP. My first question is going to go to Meraki. We'll just go down the line. You can just kind of go on after one another. Is to tell us about your work and how it connects to climate justice.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maraki. I'm an 18-year-old Ethiopian American from Vienna, Austria, and I'm currently an undergraduate student at Columbia University studying cognitive science and public health. My work in advocacy began when I was still living in Vienna. I got involved with an organization called Earth Echo International, and that is a nonprofit that was founded by Philippe Cousteau, dedicated and focused on creating a global youth movement to protect and restore our ocean planet, which we know is critical for a sustainable and equitable future for all. And my work began virtually in Vienna, but then when I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, when I was 15 years old, I started looking at the Flint water crisis and issues surrounding the Great Lakes. I'm very interested in healthcare. That's why I'm going to public health. This began through the efforts of looking at the impact of lead intoxication in communities in the greater Flint area and the greater Michigan area. And my work with Earth Echo has allowed me to look primarily at the 30 by 30, also known as the America the Beautiful campaign. But I've also worked alongside the Ocean Justice Forum and done some work on the High Seas Treaty and getting it ratified. And I'm super excited to be on this panel with amazing youth advocates. I think it's really important that youth have a seat at the table, and I'm really grateful to be here and grateful to Chair Mallory and Dr. Spinrad, as well as Haley.
Quick just announcement. I know we're really excited, but if we could maybe hold the applause until the end, just to make sure that we can have enough time for all the speakers to share their answers to the questions. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pooji Massaretti. I'm from outside of Philadelphia. I'm a second-year student at Wesleyan University studying economics with minors in environmental science and data analysis. My work first got started in 2019 working with the organization Action for the Climate Emergency, where I started at a fellowship in Pennsylvania, working on voter registration work and voter engagement, especially for BIPOC communities. Since then, I've been a youth advisory board member at ACE, and that's where I center the youth voice within ACE as well as the climate movement as a whole. Alongside more national work, I'm very involved in local grassroots organizing because I believe that's the backbone of this climate movement. I work alongside organizers in Chester, Pennsylvania, which is a town right outside of Philadelphia, home to one of the nation's largest toxic waste incinerators, which pollutes the air and negatively impacts the lives of Chester residents who are predominantly low-income Black individuals. And my work there has been incredibly fulfilling, and like Maraki mentioned, the intersection of public health and climate justice is something that's very interesting to me and what I think that we should be focusing on, because without our health, then what are we as a society? And so thank you so much for this opportunity.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natasha Patia. I'm 17 years old and a senior at Hinsdale Central High School in Illinois, which is just in the Chicago suburbs. My work started in the environmental movement actually at my school. So I was in my sophomore year, and we were watching a documentary called Before the Flood in our honors biology class during the ecology unit. And that documentary really hit me. It kind of it woke me up on the effects of climate change. I always knew that climate change was a thing, but I didn't realize how little urgency there is in the movement and how much there needs to be more action. So that really propelled me to take action and start to raise my voice as well. So I joined a movement called It's Our Future, which is in the Chicago suburbs. It works with Chicago-based youth to improve their advocacy and give them resources so that they can also fight for environmental protection. So through that movement, I did a lot of planning. We organized a lot of events for environmental activists in the area to again give them resources and enable them to also take action for environmental protection. As the co-head of Fridays for Future Chicago, I've also done the planning for the past 3 global climate strikes in the area, where again, we've been focusing a lot on youth representation and empowering and lifting up youth voices in our demands at all of these strikes. I'm very excited to be here at this panel as well, and again, be representing the voices of the youth of the United States directly to our decision makers.
Hafa everyone. My name is Raina Taitingfong. I'm a wildlife refuge specialist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Pacific Islands Refuges and Monuments Office. I know it's a really mouthful. I originally started my career as a biologist for the Department of Agriculture for Guam. I am a native Chamorro. I was born and raised on Guam, and so part of that, why I got into this, is because I grew up on the water and I could see the rising sea levels change every single day. So I wanted to go off to the mainland, went to school, came back, and I just wanted to help my island and my people. So I was a biologist for 7 years. We worked directly with all the native species, the native bird species, the native wildlife species, and anything basically to do with the water and on the land. So part of that, and if you're not familiar with the island of Guam, we have a really big invasive species problem. Out of 13 native birds, only 2 exist now, and they are only bred in captivity. And so part of that is I never had birds when I grew up, and just learning and being with these birds in captivity and trying to work with the future where future generations, my children eventually, not right now, will have a life and grow up on my island that I feel strongly for with our native species and feel really, really passionately about it. And currently as a wildlife refuge specialist for the Fish and Wildlife Service, which I just started 2 years ago, and I personally think I also have the coolest job, is that I work with all of the Pacific Islands and with all of my brothers and sisters in the Pacific. So we do all the refuges within Hawaii, Sinai, American Samoa, and of course Guam. And so we work directly with all the refuges to make sure that all the species for all of these islands can survive with all the climate change. As we know, islands in the Pacific are disproportionately affected by climate change, and so we are the frontline workers working to make sure that they still have land for these species to survive. I am also currently on the co-stewardship committee for the Pacific Islands, for all the refuges, to try and make sure that we are integrating indigenous knowledge for all the refuges, because we understand that the refuges inhabit lands that were not owned by us, but we want to make sure that as we protect the land, we are integrating the indigenous knowledge that people that come to visit our refuges, the species we protect on our refuges, that the people that belong to this land are actually a part of that conversation.
Thank you all so much. And I think it's really amazing to be able to hear from these incredible young leaders, because young people represent around 50% of our global population, but the average age of our leaders and policymakers is 65. So they're not necessarily represented fairly in these areas where decisions are being made about often our futures, and whether our futures are going to be, us being able to be empowered to continue leading these amazing solutions started by current generations, or things that we have to kind of clean up and do better so that our future generations can also have a chance at a safe and healthy future, to the point on health. And the other thing you'll note here is we have an amazing group of students from high school to college and young professionals. And that's really important to highlight, because as you're a young person, you continue to grow and develop, but at each stage, all of our voices are really important, no matter what age you are. And so here we celebrate this with the second ever Youth Day at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC's COP. And this is really exciting. Yeah, woo, I love to hear that. The second ever Youth Day. And it's so special because as someone who's also a part of the youth constituency, we've been advocating for this for a long time, and advocating for young people to have the opportunity to even have an event like this at the U.S. Center. So we're really thankful to the U.S. Center for uplifting our voices today on the second ever Youth Day, and hope to see this continue into the future. So thank y'all. And with that, I have my next question for y'all. So today we have an audience of world leaders, U.S. leaders, and they're listening to our words. Hopefully they will also be champions of our words as well, and partners in acting on the climate crisis. So what is one way that you think youth engagement could be better? And this time we're going to go from that side over.
Hi everybody, Rana Taitingfong again. One way that I think youth engagement could be better is just, well, again, I am from Guam. I was born and raised on Guam. I moved to the States when I was 18, moved back home. And moving to the mainland, you learn that we never had the resources that a lot of these schools had. And so personally, I'm going to speak on behalf of me growing up in the Pacific and not having these resources. And I think part of that is just to actually give these kids the opportunity. A lot of the stuff growing up and talking about climate change and was growing up in Guam is that a lot of things were happening to us. We didn't realize that we had a voice. We grew up learning that our voice didn't matter. And I think right now is a crazy opportunity and a super awesome opportunity that they can, as younger as you are learning then that they can't ignore climate change, they can't ignore what's happening, and we realize that we're having this voice now. And I think part of to get the youth engagement out is that it's re-educating them to learn that they actually do matter. Like I said, I grew up in a world where things happened around our island that we didn't have any control over, and we thought that no matter how many times we fought it, it's just not going to happen to us. And so if I can change one thing, and if I could actually increase that, we have the youth on island right now, in not just on Guam, but me living in my time in Honolulu, that people are trying. We're trying every single day so that you know that we are here, we are people, we are indigenous to this land. And even though there's this influx of population and things that are happening to us, we have a voice, and we're trying so that you guys can hear our voice and that we matter.
So to answer this question, I think I'm going to have to tell you guys a little bit of a story to kind of really get my point across here. So a while ago, I was on a planning team to plan the Greentown Climate and Equity Conference in Illinois. So that conference, we had like over 100 youth present, and it was an amazing event, and we actually started with an icebreaker activity. So there was a statement on the screen: I believe that I can make a difference to stop climate change. And I watched as over 80 youth went to the side of the room that said that they either disagreed or strongly disagreed with that statement. 80% of youth at a climate conference, to empower them, to show them that their voices matter, didn't believe that they would ever have an impact. And I think that's one of the main problems. Youth won't take action if they don't believe that their efforts will ever matter. That's just logic. That's common sense. And so what we need to do is we need to show youth that their voices do matter. We need to take clear, meaningful, decisive action on youth voices. Youth can make their voices very clear. When we go to strikes, we have clear demands that we speak about. On social media, we have clear videos that go viral where youth show their support of common issues. There are petitions with over 1 million signatures from youth. So when these issues come up, they're very easy to find. Youth voices are clear. And in order to continue to uplifting them, in order to continue empowering them, we have to make decisions based off of those voices, and we have to listen to them.
Very good points from both of you. My answer and my response to this question would be education, especially in our public schools. My first introduction to climate change and the climate crisis wasn't until halfway through my high school career, and that was in an optional AP environmental science elective class that the majority of my school did not take. And so I believe that mandatory education across public schools is truly the answer to ensuring that youth are engaged and educated and know the science behind climate change. And not only the science, but real life stories of people who are being disproportionately impacted by this crisis is so, so necessary, because yes, we know the science, but we also need to emphasize whose lives are being disproportionately affected and the frontline communities that are suffering the most, and how the global north is producing the most carbon emissions, but the global south is paying the price for that. And so I think this comprehensive education would benefit so many young people and allow them to get an initial grasp on what the climate crisis looks like and how to get involved in their own community. ACE has a very robust educational program known as Our Climate, Our Future. And I think more of these resources need to be promoted in public schools. And I think a mandatory climate education program across public schools would benefit young people so, so much. Starting in elementary and middle school, I think having this firm grasp on what's going on with the greenhouse gas effect could combat so much misinformation that we see nowadays on social media. I think it really starts in our schools.
To reiterate what Pooji said, I think education is key. It's imperative, especially now more than ever, that youth get a standardized learning opportunity to learn about the issues that we face in this day and age. To share a similar personal anecdote, I grew up in a landlocked country. I grew up in Austria, and although I enjoyed hikes to the Wienerwald or the Vienna woods with my family, I hadn't really looked into educating myself on matters that relate to the ocean or on matters that relate to areas outside of where I'd grown up. And so with my work with Earth Echo International, I'd been open to a new opportunity to really delve into that. But if it weren't for that organization, I'm not sure if I would have gone into that field on my own. And as Pooji said, looking at implementing that in high schools and making sure that there isn't a barrier based on race or socioeconomic status, giving everyone the same equal opportunity to learn the facts. My school, the institution that I'm currently at, has a course called Frontiers of Science in which we learn different units, and one of those units is on the climate and us and how it affects us. And so regardless of what you're studying, whether it's music, physics, it can be any topic, you take this course in order to graduate from the college. And I just had a discussion with my professor, Dr. Schmidt, on the matter, and talking about how important it is to just have that basic level of understanding is something that I think we should amplify and have for all youth.
Yeah, give some snaps. We like that. All right, thank you all so much. And I think hearing, what you're saying today is not just Youth Day, actually. It's also Education and Skills Day, and that's not combined by accident. These things are really interconnected because as young people here, we are the bridges between the past, the present, and the future generations. And for me personally, I only got involved because of climate education. Everyone who's probably here had to have learned something about climate change to inspire you to say, I really want to come to COP28 to tackle the climate crisis, right? And so we're all here benefiting from this. But what we really need is to encourage other people who don't have these opportunities to be able to have access, because climate education should be widely accessible, as we're hearing, and it should be free for anyone of all ages, young and old. And critically for young people, me personally, my mom now talks about climate change. She talks about solar panels. She talks about things like the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed recently and that we're all benefiting from. But she wouldn't have done that had it not been for me receiving climate education and having the opportunity to share that knowledge with her. And so it really is critical to creating change at all levels, because who makes our decisions? Often our parents and our grandparents, right? So we're building those bridges. And thank you all so much for really elevating the importance of youth inclusion, education, and how they're all coming together to hopefully promote active public participation, which is another really critical element of what the work that we're doing here is. So I have my next question for y'all, and it is, as we mentioned, we have leaders in the room, and though we're all leaders in our own way, and there's something that we can all do to act on the climate crisis, some leaders have greater responsibility because they have decision-making power. So, what is your message to the leaders here at COP28, but also beyond, back at home? And maybe we'll start with Pooji this time.
Thank you for the question, Haley. I think we all believe that the science is clear, right? We must decrease greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. We must limit global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We have to say no to new fossil fuel infrastructures, which endanger our ability to meet these goals. We have to say no to new fossil fuel developments like the LNG export facilities popping up across the Gulf Coast. Under the Paris Agreement, the U.S. is not accountable for emissions from these exports since they're considered exports, but we know that it's not right or correct. I'm confident that we all know these facts and statistics, and we've been hearing them a lot at COP in the past few years. But I think the U.S. is at a very pivotal point, and the way that we act in the next few years is incredibly crucial in determining the type of future that my children and future generations will have. Ultimately, I want leaders to know that Chester, the town I mentioned before, is not an outlier in the data set. There are so many communities across the United States at risk. Their health is at risk. Their children's health is at risk. Children in Chester face asthma rates that are significantly higher than the national average. This should not be the norm, and we should not settle for this. We must advocate for these communities and bring justice towards these communities. And so I want to say to you all that we all government leaders, corporations, the public sector, young people, we have both the opportunity and responsibility to create change. And to not only create change in a traditional sense, but to be creative, innovative, and bold, to both envision the future that we want and implement those strategic solutions in a thoughtful manner. So that's what I want to leave with you all today. I hope we're all inspired to create the change that we want for not only our generation, but the future generations after us.
Thank you. I completely agree with everything you said, and that was an amazing answer. Before coming to COP28, I actually sent out a form to some of, just like in general, to U.S. youth, and asking for responses for what they'd like to convey to their decision makers. So on that form, we received several responses from across the United States and actually across the world as well. And so today I'm here representing not only my voice, but the voices of these youth as well, who may not have the opportunity to come to this COP conference, but their voices still deserve to be heard just as much. So the message that they said was very clear. We need decisive action. The conservative actions that we have taken so far are not enough. And I know, I understand the steps that we have taken so far, like the IRA. That's an amazing piece of legislation. And I completely agree that that should be promoted, and the opportunities that it provides should be accessible by all communities, so we should be advocating for that. But it cannot be used as a shield behind which we cower to avoid difficult conversations like a fossil fuel phase out. We have to focus on cutting our emissions. The United States has to become the leader on a global stage to show the world how we can have an equitable phase out of fossil fuels. That means no more new fossil fuel projects, no more fossil fuel subsidies. We need to focus on cutting our emissions, and the United States needs to take the lead in this project.
I think everything that has been said so far really gets the message across. It is a privilege for us to be here today representing the youth, but there are so many other youth who want to get involved and want to get their voices heard. And so I think an emphasis on youth engagement, an emphasis on education, and an emphasis on the importance of being aware of how the ocean and the climate feed us and they hold us and they create our breath, and we wouldn't be anywhere without them. Peoples and entire cultures are being displaced as we speak. And although it's good to discuss these matters, we need action. We need there to be steps taken in the governmental and the legislative field, but also in our daily lives, and we need to find ways to get the youth voices across.
Thank you. I completely agree with everything they just said, but I am going to talk as an Indigenous woman being born in the Pacific. Yes, we need education. But because we don't know why it is our ocean levels are rising, why there's all this erosion, and how our islands are one super typhoon away from just disappearing. Like, growing up on Guam, I have seen it. I did all the fishing with my grandpa, my grandparents, everyone in my family. We are, just as Pacific Islanders, a seafaring community. That is what we've done. And so growing up, I have seen how my ocean has changed, how my reef has changed, and why all of our fishes are now disappearing, what's happening. And just in my time growing up, from when I was a kid to how I am right now, it's completely different. And it's not fair. It's not fair to the kids that are in school today, the kids that don't grow up with these species, the kids that realize that when I talk to them about it, they're not going to know. When I do decide to have children in the future, they're going to realize that these are all stories. And they're never going to be able to see it. And so, yes, I completely believe what Natasha said right now. We need action now. We need to stop talking about it, and it just needs to happen. Because if I can see it in the last 25 years from when I was 5 years old, in another 2050, is there even anything for me to talk about? Am I still going to have this indigenous knowledge that's going to be on my beaches? Am I still going to have an island to call home? And my Micronesian brothers and sisters and the rest of Polynesia and Melanesia, are we going to have these islands in a couple of years? We might not. We can talk about fossil fuels. our islands are too small. We don't create these fuels. We don't create what's happening to us. We are just on the edge of what's doing it. We have to learn how to react. And the only way that we can be proactive is, like they said, educate our youth, educate our leaders to learn that, yes, the U.S. needs to be the change. We are American territory. They have lots in the Pacific. But again, we need something to change now. We need to stop talking about policy and actually do it, because by the time we decide that there's something going to change 3 years again from now, another typhoon hits. You don't know what our ocean is going to look like then. You don't know what our beaches are going to look like then. It changes. It's just constantly changing, so that by the time something is created, it might have already changed. And I want to create a future, and I want to talk to the policymakers that I want a future for my islands. I want a future for the islands in the Pacific, my brothers and sisters there, so that our culture just doesn't disappear. Because if our island disappears in 50 years, where does that do with the people of those islands? Are they still a people? Do they still have a culture when there is no home? So if I can say one thing to you guys, that would be it. That we just need to do, like all of them said, have a change, start it now, educate everyone else so that we understand that something is going to happen, that the youth, as they grow up, have a voice and that they do matter.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for all those amazing insights. And before we go to the question and answer section part of this event, the final note is that this COP is themed Unite for Action. And here we are united as young people calling for action from our decision makers. And I really appreciate what you said, because I actually live in Honolulu, and I too am seeing everyday people who are concerned about their future, not knowing if they will be able to continue their indigenous and traditional practices every single day. And living in this state of fear and unknowing is really, really scary. Everyone on this stage knows someone who has been impacted by climate change, and I imagine everybody in the audience does too. And it's only a matter of time before it happens to all of us if we're not taking this action to stop fossil fuel subsidies, to stop extracting more fossil fuels, and to just stop relying on this energy source that's outdated and has had its time to shine. And so, as we wrap up, what I'm hearing is that the transition to a better future, it's going to be hard. I'm originally from Texas. I know this. Texas produces one of the states that produces the most oil in the country, but also a leading state in renewable energy. So that transition can happen and is happening. We just need to have that action united and in collaboration with our leaders. That is what we're asking for. Collaboration and opportunity with our leaders to create the policies and create the future that we not only want, but we deserve and that we need so that future generations can continue to thrive. And so with that, I encourage all of our leaders to really ask us the hard-hitting questions too, and remember that it's time to stop pointing fingers and say, that's not my agency, that's not my job. We all have a responsibility to act and can advocate together and direct us to the right people to advocate with, to get these things that we need done to have that future. So with that, moving to question and answer.
Thank you to all of you. Incredibly impressive presentation. I'm Shannon Espinosa. I'm the Assistant Secretary of the Interior for Fish and Wildlife and Parks. It's an honor to be with you. My question, I'm going to direct it to Raina, but I invite anyone to answer it. Representation is so important. Raina, you work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Your work there, as you grow in your career, you will necessarily change what your institution knows, does, understands as an Indigenous woman, as an Indigenous person. How important is it for the gatekeepers to the institutions that have direct impact on these resources, whether it's on the fossil fuel generation side or on the, in your case, resource protection side, that they open those gates to Indigenous people and other underrepresented youth so that they can grow and become the leaders of those institutions in the future?
And maybe we can take a couple of questions so that we can reserve some time. And if everyone can keep it short. We only have 10 minutes and a lot of great insights to share, so thank you.
I'm Ellen Stokan, the Undersecretary for Science at the Smithsonian. And to any of you who would like to answer, how can cultural and scientific institutions like the Smithsonian amplify your voices, the voices of youth around the climate crisis?
And maybe one more.
Hello, my name is Isabella. I'm a youth climate organizer from Ohio. I organize with a group called Ohio Youth for Climate Justice. I guess my question is, for quite a long time, the United States government, as well as the major corporations in our country, have known that climate change is happening, known that fossil fuels are causing it, and to be quite honest, where we're at, it doesn't seem like just sitting on panels or even hosting strikes. Quite honestly, sometimes is really forcing their hand. So I guess my question for you is, what are the strategies that we need to employ, particularly, sitting at the helm of empire, to be quite honest, and as one of the largest fossil fuel emitter countries, what are the strategies that we as youth need to be employing to actually force our government and actually force corporations to phase out of fossil fuels?
All right, thank y'all. And to the panelists, in any order, you can go first, please.
I'm here to answer Shannon's question first, and then I could probably go to that one too if you'd like. To Shannon and to all of you, I think it's all about, like we mentioned earlier in all of our questions and all of our climate just questions, that it's education and it's equity. Like, we can educate all the youth and we can educate it, but we need and have strikes and we need it to happen. Like, we're disproportionately affected, and we don't have the, I want to say, privileges that most people born in the mainland have. We don't have that education. I went to public school for my elementary and middle school. You don't learn that much about climate. We don't have the resources to do anything about it, really, at the end of the day. And so what we could do and I am so lucky to be as a wildlife rescue specialist working for the Department of Interior, I get to actually do something. I am helping. I feel better knowing that I'm helping my species, my island, my brothers and sisters in the Pacific. And if things are going to happen to us and we're not going to have a voice, this is what I can do to ensure that future generations have these native species, have this culture that they can hold on to. And so part of that is really just funding and resources. We don't have any of that. It's a lot of talk about it. We're islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that no one ever even thinks about. We're strategic for everyone. We are places people go for a vacation, but do they ever stop and actually think what all this does for us? It's everything, again, is happening to us. We don't have as big of a voice that I feel like we definitely should, especially because everything is happening to us. And so the way that I give back is try to mitigate all the things that happen to our islands. And so if I can give something to help the youth in these islands to actually grow, it's just, we need help. We need resources. We need help. We would love to have that education, but we don't have that opportunity.
Thank you. Someone else want to take any of the other questions?
In response to your question about institutions such as the Smithsonian, I think that a lot of youth turn to institutions like yours to get facts and to get the information. And I think giving out more of that, a lot of the times for BIPOC youth or underrepresented youth in general, it's difficult to get funding or to find things that may not have that financial barrier. And so your Learning Lab, which is free, is one of the incredible resources, but having more of those, or perhaps having an externship. When I worked with Earth Echo over the summer, we had a summit in San Diego, and that externship offered a stipend, and it primarily promoted marginalized communities to get involved and to learn about sustainable blue economy, as well as building career pathways in sustainable agriculture and kelp specifically. But having those opportunities for youth to get involved, whether that be on your website or on social media, and giving youth the space to get their voices out there but also learn, would be very beneficial.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about that last question that you asked. I can sense a type of frustration in your voice, and I think a lot of us embody that as young people, very frustrated with the lack of action and how slow things are to change. But I think what keeps me going is knowing that we all have individual power inside of us and we all do have a voice. And being able to share some of that is so powerful and so influential. And I think we are seeing mentalities change and attitudes change around this climate crisis. And I think it's all about all of us knowing that in our future careers that we have opportunities to truly change the tide of this crisis, whether it's going into green jobs or investing in climate finance. I think there's so many ways that we can all contribute in a myriad of different industries and sectors. And so that's what gives me hope. But I don't know.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that last question on strategies for youth as well in the environmental movement. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm also an organizer for Fridays for Future Chicago. So I've done the climate strikes, and I completely understand how difficult it is when we speak at these strikes and we mobilize people, and yet like the project goes through, and then we lose the biodiversity. That's another important piece, I think, of the conversation is youth mental health around the climate crisis. When we have these things like the climate loss and like the guilt and also the grief and the sadness, and having all of those feelings and them kind of like facing those in the climate movement. So I guess dealing with those, and as a strategy for youth environmental action as well, is finding a community of voices, finding a group of peers who also support all of your actions and support you in all of these things that you're feeling. Someone who you can go to when there's a wildfire, or someone who you can go to when one of the projects that you've been advocating against goes through as well. Finding that community of voices is really strong. You can also, I'd say, looking at legislation, passing legislation on a local, state, national level even, for things like climate education, going to school boards, and using climate education in your school, because again, that builds that community of voices, that builds that youth acknowledgement and empowerment in the environmental movement.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And quickly, I have a great idea for a Smithsonian. I think we should have a Smithsonian dedicated to the climate movement and the history, and showing all the amazing work that we're doing, because that inspires other people. I know when I go to a Smithsonian, I leave really inspired. And so we would love to see one dedicated to that at large. And unfortunately, we are here low on time, so I think we'll pause the questions for now. But of course, feel free to reach out to any of us. You can find probably all of us on social media if you look at the program, and we're happy to answer any questions. And to the young person who asked about what can you do, it's advocate, advocate, and advocate again in your community. And at the national level, we have all these different levels of action. And so we know it's hard, and we're here to do it with you. And with that, I'm really honored to introduce one of our amazing youth champions who I had the pleasure of meeting last year, who actually offered to meet with the youth before we asked to meet with him, which is rare in this space. So very thankful to you for that, and has done amazing work to elevate young people at NOAA and beyond. And so I'm honored to introduce Dr. Rick Spinrad, who's been a great champion, and we look forward to continuing this work together, as well as sharing the National Youth Statement with you that you were present for this past October. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Let's give a round of applause for this panel, this amazing panel. My job, which is rather daunting, is to provide some closing comments here, and also to try to represent the distinguished group of my peers representing a diversity of interests in the federal government. And as I was putting thoughts together and listening carefully to your comments, I thought about when I was 17, there was no COP. There wasn't even an Earth Day, I will tell you. And it's just remarkable to think about it now. Haley, I appreciate your comment that half the population is youth. I resemble your comment that the average age of the leaders is 65. I'll point out for me that's actually in the rearview mirror, but I actually believe you're only as old as the age of the groups you engage with. And so that's why I feel as passionately as I do about youth engagement. I want to do a couple of things. I want to reflect on some of what we heard here very briefly, because I'm sure we all have our own perceptions of the comments that were made. Then I want to actually talk very briefly about a deliverable that ties in nicely with the discussion here, and then close out with a brief discussion of what some of the kinds of opportunities for youth are that are developing now. So as I listened carefully to your comments, there were a few things that jumped out at me. First of all, the action orientation. Every one of you talked about things that could be done. And more importantly, you recognize that you have the ability and that there is value to that ability in how you are empowered to address issues like fossil fuel phase out. So that action orientation was the one critical takeaway. The seamless connections you alluded to with respect to climate, health, economy, environmental justice in towns like Chester is something that I think I can share with my colleagues here in the front row. We strive so hard to get that message across in the federal government, which tends to be compartmentalized. Today we're talking about transportation. Today we're talking about health. No, the climate issues we're talking about are infused across all of those elements. The other thing that came through loud and clear is we talk about the educational agenda. You are the educational agenda. We do it as outside viewers. You are involved with education right now. So how do we exploit that more fully in youth engagement? The sense of ownership that I heard from this group as a critical component of youth engagement, including valuing indigenous knowledge. A lot of times when we talk about co-stewardship, we're talking about different ethnic groups, different demographics. Clearly, the co-stewardship issues mean co-stewardship by generations as well. And then the encouragement to be bold came out loud and clear. I've now heard that in so many youth engagement activities, and I think it's important for us, especially federal government employees, to hear that kind of encouragement, to try to be bold. I heard angst and frustration, but I also heard hope. And that to me is also encouraging. And I think those of us in the audience who are climate realists are also climate optimists. So that hope is something that we also share with you. So what can we do about these challenges? Let me talk briefly about something that we're developing. And we develop with the help of Youth Perspectives at NOAA and a team of other U.S. federal agencies. We are updating the Climate Literacy Guide with input from young people around the world. So that guide was originally established in 2009. And in terms of climate knowledge, that's like a million years ago. And this guide covers the basic climate knowledge that people should know to be considered climate literate. It's written for educators, it's written for communicators, decision makers who want to help the public. You talked about your moms and dads and uncles and aunts, how the public understands how humans are changing the climate, how climate is impacting our planet, and what we can do about it. So we're excited to announce that the guide will be officially released in early 2024 for public comment. So keep that in mind. That's an important thing that folks should be engaged with. The guide now includes up-to-date understanding of the climate system, incorporates the cultural context of climate change, and focuses on justice solutions and local and indigenous knowledge. We hope that the guide is going to be useful for this range of users. We heard from over 100 young people through listening sessions organized by the writing team, and the upcoming public review is another opportunity for youth engagement. So when the draft comes out for public review in 2024, we need your feedback, and you are all involved with formal organizations. Use those organizations for feedback as well as your individual engagement. You can follow at NOAA Climate on social media to stay updated on the public review of the guide. Across the U.S. government, and I'm looking at my colleagues in the front row, agencies and departments are expanding youth engagement opportunities. I will tell you that from my standpoint at NOAA, we started the 2024 Young Changemakers Fellowship application process. The Smithsonian is creating a new Youth Ambassadors program. showcasing youth-driven climate actions as part of its Life on a Sustainable Planet initiative. The Department of State is launching a program with the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues called Global Girls Climate Corps. That's going to begin in FY24. And the Department of Interior is expanding efforts to engage young people in addressing the climate crisis with initiatives across its bureaus, including through the Indian Youth Service Corps. All of these activities, USAID is working to increase its financial and technical resources for youth-led organizations to enable a leadership role in addressing the climate crisis through both direct action and influence. And we could walk through just about every bureau and agency in the federal government, and of course CEQ is there to make sure we're doing this in the most bold way fashion. Thank you for that, Chair Mallory. So I'm really glad we had this opportunity today to hear from youth directly on issues that matter, not just to you, but to all of us. I'd like to try to double down even more than we've done thus far on the need to heed the voice of youth. I would argue shame on us, shame on all of us if we don't embrace the energy, intellect, enthusiasm, organization, and hope as expressed here today. Youth need a seat at the table, a voice in our decisions, and a role in our work, period. In future COPs, I hope we can see more youth integrated into a variety of panels to make sure your perspectives and expertise are presented throughout the conversation. So let's continue this conversation and strengthen our collaborations to address the climate crisis hand in hand. Thank you so very much.